Okay.
Hello, Gary Con goers. It's your host, Luke Gygax. I'm here today with none other than Richard August, one of the creative geniuses behind SteamForged Games' Epic Encounter line. Thanks for joining me today, Richard.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, absolutely. For those of you who may not be familiar with Richard, let me give you just a few pieces of information about his background. He's been a designer since 2015, and he's worked on a bunch of stuff before he came to SteamForged Games, including Judge Dredd in the Worlds of 2000 AD, RuneQuest, and Conan Adventures in an Age Undreamed of. But at Epic Encounters, at SteamForged Games, he's worked on Epic Encounters as well as Animal Adventures, which is a favorite in my house. My kids, when I say let's play D&D, they go, "Oh, can we play Animal Adventures?" I'm like, "Okay, of course." And then Bard's Son, which is they're a really neat other game from SteamForged Games, which you should check out at steamforged.com. But today, I want to talk to Richard specifically about Epic Encounters. But before we get there, I guess just to kind of orient us, what got you interested in role-playing, the role-playing games as a hobby?
So I started, gaming started for me with Warhammer. I think if you're a British kid, there is a Games Workshop, or a Warhammer as it's now called, pretty much on every major high street, and you see all the minis in there, and I thought they looked amazing, and you go in and you're surrounded by all this awesome stuff, but I was very, very bad at painting, and I really didn't particularly enjoy the modeling at all. And then somebody mentioned, "Oh, well, you should try Dungeons and Dragons, because you get all this amazing stuff, but it's all just in books and you can imagine everything." And that was perfect for me. So the first game product I ever bought was the D&D Third Ed starter set, because I came into the hobby pretty much just as Third Ed dropped. And then I went from there to get the Player's Handbook and the Monty Cook's DM's Guide and the Brilliant Monster Manual. And I never looked back.
Oh, great. Yeah, I mean, Dungeons and Dragons is in Theater of the Mind is great, and that's kind of where I cut my teeth just on an earlier edition, obviously, with AD&D is pretty much was my go-to, and I still play it today along with, 5th edition. The current stuff is very good as well. I think they've really kept the line going strong, in my opinion. But you took a big leap. When did you realize that you wanted to write RPGs for, like, professionally for a living, and what gave you the confidence to believe that you could make it? Because I know there's a lot of people out there, who are working and writing and are avid gamers, but being able to do it professionally, that's a real accomplishment. So where did you get that confidence to go for it?
So I mean, I've always written from being a tiny child, stories and all sorts. And when I got into D&D, I produced huge amounts of stuff for my world, lists of kings and languages and all this stuff that you do when you first get into D&D. And I kind of never stopped, really. And then I spent some time, trying to write very serious novels, and kind of got tired of that and wanted to get back to doing something that I found more fun and fulfilling. And I started looking at RPGs, and then I thought I should try. So I sent out a lot of emails with samples, and some people got back to me, and it went from there. So, once I had a couple of, I think the first place that ever published me was Kobold Press, that published tiny, about 250 word snippets of places on their website, which are still on there, I think, if you go and look. But yeah, just little ideas and things like that, so that when I started emailing not bigger companies than Kobold Press, but looking for bigger opportunities with companies, I could say, well, I've written these liked it, and it went from there. And then Modiphius was kind of the next big company I worked for, and I got very lucky to kind of get in on the Conan line early. So it's a process of luck and writing a lot.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's that's a story that I've heard so many times. My father told me, if you want to write, if you want to be a writer or a designer, you got to do it. Just get in your reps, get in your 10,000 hours, right? So it's just doing it. It comes, it flows easier. You get better, and you develop your style. And speaking of style, what were your influences? What were your influential RPG influences that helped kind of shape the way you design and write?
So, like I think uh, a lot of people who want to be writers, I've got a qualification in creative writing, and what part of that is taking a text and analyzing it and looking at how it's put together. So I did that with the RPGs I really liked. So people like Ken Hite and Robin D. Laws were big influences for that kind of. They get a conversational style, which means that even when they're describing something in terms of rules that's quite knotty, it feels really easy to understand. Um, a lot of the early D&D adventures have this kind of sense of fun and a sense that you're all in on the joke, that everybody knows, not that the adventure itself is a joke, but that this is kind of this is a fun hobby. This is new and it's different, and everybody involved in it is taking risks. So a lot of that, I try to get a lot of that kind of slightly tongue-in-cheek to acknowledge that this is a game. We're all in this together. We're all creating something together. It's a shared process, and I think that's what makes RPG writing different from any other writing. That you're not giving somebody a world, you're helping them make their own. And I think that that's something I've tried to keep in my style, the knowledge that I'm here to help you get to where you want to as a player or as a GM, rather than here is some text, read it.
Yeah, I think that's a really important distinction. And from talking to people who write novels or things of that nature, it's very different, right? Because it's written and it's carrying a passive reader through a story and through a development. And with RPGs and trying to design a module or anything, we all know this just from our home games. You don't know what your protagonists are going to do. You may put a puzzle in front of them, and you think, oh, this is going to take them, that's going to be hard to figure out. And it's like, boom, they either figure it out, or you think it's an obvious clue. They totally miss it. So it's more, you got to be adaptive. And when you're designing something for others to use in their adventure, in their game, you have to be cognizant of that. So I think that's a really good thing to keep in mind. And it is a game. Sometimes people, I think, get too serious. The purpose is, for me, and I guess I don't want to tell anybody else how to game, but for me, it's really to spend time with friends and other people, and like I said, create a story, maybe laugh, have some stories to talk about later down the road. So those are all wonderful elements to include, in my opinion. I'm glad you feel that way as well. But more, it's great. I mean, you talked about some of the other past companies. How did you end up at SteamForged Games?
Luck, basically. I was very. I think anybody who's going to get a full-time job RPG developing needs a lot of luck these days, and I was very lucky in that SteamForged headquarters is 10 minutes around the corner from my house, and I had job alerts set up, as a tabletop. Obviously, I wanted to work in tabletop, and a game developer role came up. So I applied and I got an interview, and the interview went well, but I didn't get the job. But it kind of went well enough that my name was kept around, and Jamie Perkins, who's the development manager, remembered me when our presiding Dark Lord, Matt Hart, was mentioning that he wanted to get into, started to look at making RPGs from SteamForged, because Matt is a die-hard RPG nerd. I don't think you'll mind me saying that. He loves RPGs. He's got encyclopedic knowledge of old games and mechanics, and he's always, looking for something new. And he wanted to start doing something with RPGs for SteamForged. So I had this experience, and I got a call and asked to go back in to talk with Matt. And on that day, I had a load of Conan author copies showed up, so I was able to take those in with me. And well, what have you done? Well, there you go. That's my experience there. And we had we kind of hit it off straight away. Had a long chat. He, we discussed a load of games. I gave him a game he hadn't heard of it. He gave me a couple to look up, and we kind of went from there really. So it was a mixture of having had this solid basis of work. I knew my way around the RPG industry, and a lot of luck.
Yeah, I think that's a major ingredient in anybody, like you said, is luck. I still remember, when my father was running TSR back in those days. We lived in a small town of Clinton, Wisconsin, in the middle of nowhere, and there was a guy teaching high school named Doug Niles, and he approached my sister Heidi and got an introduction to my dad, and was able to submit some work, and ended up being, a pretty well-known designer and author. So sometimes it's just that lucky break and being in the right place at the right time, and being 10 minutes away and getting that second look. That's great. And you're writing the Epic Encounters line, which I'm fortunate enough to have a whole bunch of. You can see some of them behind me. So I think they're really great. And for those of you who may not know what an Epic Encounters entails, I'll just give just a very brief overview. So they're boxed sets, and kind of the intent is you can open this box and be ready. You have everything you need for an adventure, and rapidly be able to stand up a cinematic adventure where you'll have interesting foes with flavor. They're colorful. They're going to surprise people. There's techniques on how to use them. And of course, each box comes with up to 20 miniatures with up to 9 different sculpts. And these are really beautiful miniatures. Again, SteamForged.com, you can look at the Epic Encounters and see some really beautiful pictures of these. And it comes with a dual-sided map that's about 2 feet by 1.5 feet wide, roughly. And encounter books, like 30, 40-page encounter books that give you all the descriptions of monsters and these cool additions that we'll talk about. But all that comes in a box. They're paired together in a war band or a boss encounter, and you can play them individually, or together. So either one, they're standalone, or you can pair them together, like the kobold and the red dragon, or you have the orcs and the frost giant and the goblins and the hydra. And at this point, I'll have probably been slaughtered horribly by a hydra in a game on Friday at Gary Con, but I'm very excited to play. I know it's going to be a challenge, but that's Epic Encounters. So what's your, how do you write these? How do you put these together? Because it's very impressive. I'm very curious to hear, what your process was.
So it starts off with a team effort, because obviously we've got the miniatures are created by our amazing sculpting team. That's headed up by Russ Charles, and there's Ben and Tom and Holly, and I'm sure I'm missing somebody, but they're all amazing. And so kind of I'll have said this, we're going to do goblins next, and I have these ideas for what I want them to be like, where I'm trying to go with it. These are the different types I'm thinking of including in an encounter, and then they'll come back with a ton of amazing ideas. And sometimes they'll have completely changed my intention, but I think that's one of the best ways of creating something, is getting lots of different people's ideas and making them work together, rather than sort of sticking to one path. So once I've got all that, I start to basically try and work out how these communities, how these tribes or clans or what have you live together, and what their society is going to look like. Because orcs aren't all the same, kobolds aren't all the same, goblins aren't all going to be the same. They're all going to have their different ways of being, and that gives me at least a setting. And once you've got that, you can start to plot out a cool, challenging encounter, and things like the 5-room dungeon or rune hammers, encounter guides, and a lot of early D&D adventures. Then I kind of do a lot of research and think about things, and then start building up from there, start writing, basically.
Yeah, I mean, in these are really neat, and a lot of thought goes into them. Just looking at the village of the Kobold Chief, I mean, there's these neat charts in there that talks about there's some mushrooms that grow in there, and you get to roll on a chart. I love rolling on charts, right? I mean, who doesn't love rolling on charts for random stuff? So there's different effects of what the mushroom is going to have. I know in the Frost Giant, there's different environmental effects that'll be going on. I mean, so there's just a lot of really cool touches on how to use these adventures. And they're not just one, you can take that material and use it later. So if you run into a Frost Giant in the future, you may not have used all the the tricks, techniques, and tactics that you would find suggested in the adventure book. So you can use that for your next Frost Giant encounter if you're playing in whatever. We run into Frost Giants. They're great. They're great enemies to have. So they're adaptable. But out of the epic encounters that are out now, which one is your favorite?
That is the tough one. I do love the Goblin Chief.
Yeah.
Because I tried to give that box set a kind of a part Wicker Man, part Monty Python vibe. So it's got that kind of crazy, funny goblin aspect to it, and it's also got some kind of sinister, culty, insular aspects that you get in folk horror. And also the Goblin Chief has a mask on, and masks are cool. But I think possibly the Frost Giant edges it just because that miniature is amazing. He is so characterful and so imposing. And also I've been playing a lot of Assassin's Creed Valhalla. So that may sway it. That might be, the Nordic vibe might be pushing me that way, to be fair.
Yeah, it's hard to choose because, I mean, these all have, they all have so much, I guess it's flavor or color. Just even the names of some of these things. I mean, I'll just pop open some of these, the Bloodwood Goblins. They're not just a goblin, they're the Bloodwood Goblins. You got, Blood Dart Goblin Enforcer, Bloodwood Goblin Frog Chewer. That's just one of, the idea of a goblin that chews up tree frogs and basically is numbed by the euphoric qualities of this frog, that they have resistance to damage and this sort of stuff. So that's pretty cool. And of course, the Hetman, we already talked about that. But I mean, you got orcs riding polar bears. I mean, neat stuff. So a lot of color and a lot of flavor that takes you away from, okay, there's a goblin, there's an orc, and it really gives the players, like I said, this colorful cinematic experience. The Frost Giant is cool. If I remember right, if he's in his lair, right, he's in his lair, he's got certain things, the bosses have certain things they can do in their lair that make them a bit more challenging. I think he can create icicles falling from the ceiling, or break off a chunk of ice to use as a shield. There's just lots of neat stuff that's just cool visuals for your players to imagine. So I really dig obviously you can tell I like the epic encounter stuff. So I'm really happy to be talking to you about it. And you talked about these evil, the enemy characters, and the Frost Giant was pretty cool. Is there any other, what about, we're going to fight the Hydra. So what about the Red Dragon? I mean, what can you tell me about the Red Dragon one that I haven't read this one yet?
So the Red Dragon is, I think when you're doing something like the Red Dragon and you're doing it, it's compatible with D&D. You can't. I think you have to retain the classic flavor. You can't go too far away. So what we tried to do, and it took a lot of drafts to get the right setup for that encounter, is make it like the most dragony dragon it is a cruel, calculating, unpleasant beast who will victimize people who go in there and spout their mouth off. The big guy who goes in the front and thinks, I'm level 20 now, or I have a +3 axe and I have every ability known to man and all the feats, he will basically go out of his way to incinerate that character. And that's what we wanted to capture, a kind of sense of playful malice, I think, is what we wanted from the dragon. And I hope that comes across, that it's dragon in excelsis rather than something completely different to what you might expect.
So I'm when I read these, I get a sense of how these differ from maybe other current system 5e modules or adventures or booklets, books that I'm reading. So where did you draw like your GMing style from? In what flavor? Kind of how did that shape these box sets?
So one of the things. So basically, I mean, there's a lot of new people coming into the hobby at the minute, which is wonderful. But when you come in new to the hobby, you come in perhaps with certain expectations, but without necessarily having learned the techniques and tricks that you need to really achieve what you want to achieve, especially as a GM. GMing is hard. It's especially hard if you've not done it a lot, if this is the first couple of times. And running a boss encounter is possibly the hardest thing I think you can do as in a fantasy game, because players have seen Lord of the Rings or The Hobbit or Conan, and they know when they fight a giant monster, it should be epic. And sometimes, unless you're a really experienced GM, improvising, going with the flow, bringing all the kind of flavor notes to life to make sure it doesn't just become I roll, I hit, I do 2d12 damage, is difficult. So we really wanted to make it not hand-holdy for the GMs, but with lots of guidance to show how you could act out what the dragon or Hydra does. So there's lots of behavior tips there. How you can, when you should use certain abilities, what player responses might be, or how they might approach you, and how the Hydra or the dragon or the frost giant or the giant snake, as a teaser for later, how they are going to react. So we wanted to make it so that as a GM, you were fully prepared. And that's something both Matt and I do in our games. We don't always have, something as fully worked out as Epic Encounters, but we know what's going to happen in the games we play. We know how our bad guys are going to present themselves. And there's a lot of 4E in there, I think, certainly with, the kind of the encounter sets you used to get in 4E, or with the abilities that, are very, very kind of characteristic of the monsters that possess them. There's an awful lot of the early D&D adventures and some of the OSR stuff that draws on them in terms of that kind of unique setting and being prepared to play with the form, if you like, play with the structures of adventures, move things around, and not settle into a routine. So it's a kind of, basically it's trying to give GMs a chance to create their own style. It's like, it's permission, we hope.
Yeah, I have to say that I really enjoy those little tips that are in there. And I think they're valuable. And even for an experienced GM, you get some tidbits, some things that you may not have thought of. And so it's great to have those. They're also just handy, and you can export them to other encounters as little tables or things of that nature as well. One thing I didn't mention that is a neat feature with every Epic encounter is that it's tiered, it's scalable. So you have a low, medium, and high level. So you can take this same adventure. You could have the orcs in the frost giant, and you could take a third level party through there, and it would be tiered to provide a challenge for them. Or you could take 12th or 14th level characters through there, and you can scale it up and make it appropriate. So wherever you're at, you can use these, and the GM tips and the techniques and how they're going to attack and stuff like that all flows very well with that. Another thing, in my opinion, and I think that Epic Encounters does really, really well, is you take the familiar orcs, kobolds, goblins, and you make it fresh. Like I said, colorful. The word colorful, it keeps coming to mind. How do you do that? How do you make something so familiar feel new and exciting?
It's basically a kind of process of taking a monster or a creature or a species and thinking about how you can look at it from different perspectives, how it might live, how they might gather together, what's it going to look like if you push one element of that creature to its furthest degree. So like with the kobolds have become kind of cute, and I don't like cutesy as an aesthetic in some ways, and I certainly don't like it when it applies to monsters that you should be frightened of. So what is a kind of key element of kobolds? Well, they're miniature dragons. Or certainly they can see themselves as miniature dragons. So I sort of started thinking through that. So what does that mean? Well, maybe they worship dragons, and if they worship dragons, well, what does worship look like in the worst circumstances? Well, it looks like fanaticism, and fanaticism has cultic associations. You have kind of dark prophecies, and you can then extrapolate from there to get a new take on a creature or on a subset of those creatures. A single tribe. I don't think you want every kobold to be a dragon worshipping fanatic. You don't want every orc to be a northern Germanic inspired barbarian, but for one or two or three encounters, that kind of that twist makes them really different, even if it's just an aesthetic.
Yeah, I absolutely agree. When I write adventures myself, I try to include some little different twist, whether it's reskinning a monster so it doesn't look, so it appears different and people can't guess what it is or what its vulnerabilities may be, or adding that environmental challenge, which you do very effectively in here in Epic Encounters as well. So yeah, great new stuff, but I think you're tapping into some of the best of the old school techniques and really bringing it to this new audience that we're fortunate to have in the hobby. So now that you've done orcs and kobolds and goblins, how do you go about choosing what the next box set is going to be?
It's a surprisingly difficult process because there's so many cool things, and you also want to try and avoid retreading the same ground too often. So it's kind of just what I fancy doing at the time as well. I'm quite lucky in that I kind of get to go basically flick through the monster manual and go, that would kind of work. And maybe I've got an idea for that, and I'll put together some notes and I'll fire them over to Matt, and he will usually come back with something even better, and we'll kind of figure it out from there. And then the sculptors obviously are a big part of it. So it's this kind of process of working out what everybody thinks is cool. It's basically what do we think is cool and what can we get away with. That's the presiding method.
It sounds like a dream job. I know there's a lot of work that goes into it, but it sounds like a lot of fun. So yeah, that's like you really did get lucky working for SteamForged, I think.
I really did. I really did.
Yeah, for sure. All right, so since we're talking about it, can we ask what's up next for Epic Encounters? What's going to come at us next?
Okay, so I think I think a giant snake. It's called the Temple of the Snake God. Is available for pre-order. I am not allowed to say what the warband box that accompanies that giant snake is, but if I say Indiana Jones wouldn't like them, I think you can probably figure it out from there. And I've tried to give them. I think there's a really interesting take on that particular species that I'm not allowed to mention. And then we've also, after that, we have a truly awesome giant spider, and Tom Lishman, who did the sculpt, absolutely knocked it out of the park. If you are arachnophobic in the slightest, don't look at it. And I will say also, to blow my own trumpet for a minute, the encounter is nasty.
Yeah, spiders are just icky anyway. I mean, I don't like spiders very much. Snakes are okay. You say, Temple of the Snake, makes me think of Thulsa Doom, the old Conan movie, and James Earl Jones changing into a snake. I mean, that's what comes to my mind there. That's a great visual for me. But spiders just makes me, I don't like the spiders at all. Which is great.
We won't send you that one.
It'll give you a sense of dread, which is great. The tension, building the tension is super important to keeping the players on their toes and really having fun. So, all right, I look forward to seeing both of those new sets and playing them, probably at conventions. I think, man, I really like the idea of being able to pull this box out and bam, run an adventure on the fly with my friends, because these are really, like you said, the booklet takes you through there, and I'd guess reasonably about 15 minutes you could be unboxing to 15 minutes, and you can be shaking dice.
Basically, as long as your players have character sheets and dice, you can be up and playing in no time at all.
Yeah. So which is perfect, because that's always the drag for me anyway, is just, kind of getting that going. So we know what's coming for Epic Encounters. What else, or what's next for you at SteamForged, or what else do you have on the plate at SteamForged?
So we've got a lot of role-playing game stuff coming soon. A lot of it, unfortunately, I'm not allowed to talk about, except to hint in the broadest terms. So we've got, we are going to be kind of diversifying the Epic Encounters line in some really interesting ways, and kind of bringing the ethos of Epic Encounters to other common situations the GMs need to deal with, so to try and make GMs' lives as easy as possible, and that we're really excited about that. We are currently putting together the next campaign for Animal Adventures, which is looking to expand the universe beyond Gullet Cove, which was the subject of the last one, and is already looking really, really exciting. We're starting to get some art in, and it's going to be really, really great. That may or may not go to Kickstarter. We're not decided on that at the minute, but whatever happens, it's going to be awesome. We've got a big game in the pipeline for a really, really great IP, but I'm not allowed to talk about it except to say it's consuming my life at the minute, but in the best way possible. And we also have lots more Epic Encounters. I think we've got the next 5 or 6 waves loosely planned out, and there are some really, really, really exciting stuff in there that I can't wait to write and terrify players with.
That sounds fantastic and very exciting. So, well, thank you very much for taking the time to talk to me today, Richard. I hope everyone enjoyed learning about Epic Encounters. If you want to learn more about Epic Encounters, go to steamforged.com and find Epic Encounters, and it'll walk you through all the minis and the map and the book and the tips, and check it out for yourself. So thank you very much for joining us today, Richard. Really appreciate your time.
Thanks for having me.
All right, now we'll get back to GaryCon.